We're going to start out with a good old hymn, hymn 448, Just a Closer Walk with Thee.
Say
from the kids. So can y'all come and join us? Yes, yes, it's not going to hurt you. Come on. Come on, kids. Preteens, y'all are included. I need you don't even have to sing, just look pretty and do some hand gestures, please. Okay. Okay, so growing up, we always had to do this at church, so I think the kids need to help us out. And don't be shy, adults, feel free to do the hand motions too, as we sing, Lord, I lift your name on high. What a good job you kids did. Okay, as we do it again next time, you'll know what we're doing. You won't look at me like I'm silly. We'll get this routine eventually, y'all. Okay, so our next hymn anyway, sorry, inside joke. Okay, so our next hymn is actually talking about lilies, and it's one that I haven't sung very often. It's kind of an oldie but goodie, but it talks about the lily of the valley. And it's interesting to think that as Easter comes around, I don't know about you, but in my church growing up, our altar would be covered in lilies. And anyone who had gone to be with Christ, their family members would honor them by purchasing a lily and having it represented all over the altar. And I just remember thinking, okay, what is the significance of the lily? And as Matthew 6:28 says, "And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these." So I think about the fact that no matter what we do, we're never going to be good enough to be like Christ. We're never going to be as glorious as Christ was. And so would you stay seated and sing with us this morning, The Lily of the Valley? Hymn 189.
All I need to cleanse and make me fully whole.
morning needs very little introduction. As we think about over the next week, we think about the sacrifice that Christ has done for us. And it's that time we reflect on what are we doing with our lives? And what are the choices that we make today affect tomorrow? And so I've heard this song a while ago from one of my favorite groups, and it just really spoke to me that no matter what we do in our life, no matter the mistakes we make, God still chose to send his son to die for us. Regardless of what we choose to do, he would have still died for us.
Amen.
The cruelest world, the coldest heart, the deepest wound, the endless dark, the lonely ache, the burning tears, the bitter nights, the wasted years, life breaks and falls apart, but we know these are places where grace is soon to be so amazing. It may be unfulfilled, it may be unrestored, but when anything that shattered is laid before the Lord, just watch and see. It will not be unredeemed. For every choice that led to shame, and all the love that never came, for every vow that someone broke, and every life that gave up hope, we live in the shadow of fall. But the cross says these are all places where grace is soon to be so amazing. It may be unfulfilled, it may be unrestored, but when anything that's shattered is laid before the Lord, just watch and see. It will not be unredeemed. it will not be unredeemed.
But he drinks these monster drinks, one after the other. In fact, he collects them in his office. And I went in his office Saturday afternoon with a 30-gallon trash bag and collected all the cans because I'm going to sell them because I'm cheap. Okay? And so I took all them, but we call him Monster. And I thought, you know, they tell us all the time on the job, the safety department and all, they tell us, don't get involved in all these monster drinks. They're not really good for you. They're not good for you at all. So in my mind, I'm thinking, you're very tired. You've still got to go and load this sound equipment, set the stage up. When you're all done with the program and everything, you've got to break it down, drive all the way home. You're tired. And you're old. So I'm thinking, okay, we stopped at Buc-ee's. You know, that's the other place where America shops. We stopped there, and I bought one of these 5-hour energy drinks. Yeah, y'all know where I'm going, don't you? I bought one of them, and I waited till we were there, and we started setting up equipment, and I'm about to fall out. I'm so tired. And I guzzled that little thing down real quick. It didn't take long before I'm thinking, ooh, I don't like this. The old part of me still on the outside doing this, looking like Eeyore. And inside it's like a whole hive of bees just buzzing around. And I didn't like that at all, but I was awake. I stayed awake. I even drove home. I did pretty good. So I was thinking on the way here, you know, I ought to get, no, I better not. I better not. So it's kind of ironic that Brother Jack would say that about staying awake during the sermon. But anyway, if you will turn to the book of Nahum, chapter 1. We're going to read verses 2 through 9. And if you're able, would you please stand for the reading of God's Word. It says, God is jealous, and the Lord revengeth. The Lord revengeth, and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger, and great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord hath his way in the whirlwind and in the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebuketh the sea, and maketh it dry, and drieth up all the rivers. Bashan languisheth, and Carmel and the flower of Lebanon languisheth. The mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burned at his presence, yea, the world and all that dwell therein. Who can stand before his indignation? Who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His fury poured out like fire, and the rocks are thrown down by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knoweth them that trust in him. But with an overwhelming flood he will make an utter end of the place thereof. And the darkness shall pursue his enemies. What do ye imagine against the Lord? He will make an utter end. Affliction shall not rise up the second time. Father, again we approach your throne. Lord, we thank you for the privilege that we have to be able to serve you. And Lord, I just ask for my own self, Lord, that you just use me as your vessel. Lord, pour through me the message that you would have heard today. Father, I ask that you give me wisdom. I ask that you give each and every one of us wisdom to be able to take your word and apply it to our life and our daily walk and talk and everything that we do and say. Father, the world out there is watching us. You've called us to be your witnesses. You've called us to be your vessels. And Father, help us to do that in a way that pleases you. In Jesus Christ, and we pray and ask. Amen.
Amen.
Nahum wrote this little book about Nineveh when Assyria was at her peak in power in the world. This was a nation that had a reputation for being quite brutal and torturous to the people that they attacked. For some 300 years or so, it had been a great city, and for the past 100, it had been the terror of the world. It was strongly fortified and had many, many military victories. Most recently, it had taken Israel captive. They would destroy and loot the cities, burn them, do whatever they could. They would bury folks alive and even impale them and leave them in the sun to burn. Vicious, vicious people. All the nations wanted to avoid them. Only God's intervention could change things at this point. You believe that? You believe there are times in our life that only God can do anything? Too many times we tend to put ourselves in there like, I have to do this, I have to do that, without depending on God. Us as Christians, imagine that. Chuck Swindoll put a book out many, many years ago when I was ordained as a minister. I was given this book. It's a book called Improving Your Serve. Awesome little book. An eye-opener in many things. And in that, it talks about the pyramid that we make for ourselves. If you can imagine, all cap letters, and it says I, me, mine, and myself. Amen. That pyramid. And we tend to do that in our lives. We tend to put us there as the one that can fix it up. I'm pretty OCD. Those that know me well enough know that I'm OCD and I'm a control freak in a lot of ways. Right, Donna? Oh, yeah. I'm also the president of the Bay Area Gospel Music Association, and I'm pretty adamant about what the board and officers do and tell them, no, we're going to do it this way. Why don't I leave them alone and let them do their jobs? I guess because I just need to be slapped down every now and then. I have to remember who's in charge and who's in control. And that's what we tend to do. I'm a supervisor at work, same thing. I try to stay out of their business. I assign them the work and say, here, it's yours. So once I give them ownership, aside from saying, how's it going? Do I need to get in their business? No, not really. Not in the line of work that we are. But we tend to do that. Only God's intervention could change things at this point as far as Assyria and the way the world was looking at them. And it says there that God is a jealous God. Nineveh's going to fall. Nineveh's going to fall. These scriptures are not a warning to Nineveh. They had already gotten that from Jonah about 150 years before. We all know the story of Jonah when he was told by God, you need to go to Nineveh. Oh, United doesn't have a flight going that way. I don't think I want to go. So what did he do? He doesn't give them a bus either. There ain't no Greyhound available. He gives them fish. He went the long way around, but he made his way to Nineveh because God is going to win, ultimately. Amen. He's going to use a vessel, one way or the other. Jonah went there some 150 years before, and he did what he was supposed to do at that point. At this point in history, there is no hope for Nineveh. They had repented when Jonah went there. And this 150 years later, for the last 100 of it, they became the terror of the world. Everybody was afraid of Assyria. God knows the future, and he gave this message to Nahum to tell. God's judgment will fall. Emphatically, it will fall. And this is a message of hope for Judah to encourage them to trust God. The word jealous, by our definition, takes on a whole new meaning than the word jealous in the scriptures here. God doesn't have the same kind of jealousy that we would have. It's not the same definition. I like to think of it as this. In the Genesis account in creation, when God is going through creation here and everything that we see in the scriptures on the first day, second day, and everything else, and then points there, he says it is good. If you grab a Webster's dictionary and you look up the word good, I promise you, that definition that we have in there pales to God's definition of good. And then when he gets to the part of creation where he creates man and he breathes life into the nostrils of man. And then he says, it was very good. Man, the ones who let him down. But yet he said it was very good. Why? I don't know. I don't have the mind of the great I am. But his definition is far different than ours. So the word jealous here, God is a jealous God. It doesn't mean jealousy in the way that we would interpret it. It means something totally different. Can I give you the proper definition? I cannot. I wouldn't even try. I don't have the mind of God. But I promise you it is a different definition. He hates sin even though he loves the sinner. God is protective of his people and his law. And you know, we've done prison work for about some 30 years or so now. I lose track. And so we go, a lot of people say, well, I've got a heart for the prisoners. It's not that, folks. You got a heart for those that are in need. Amen. You know, he tells us to go. It's not a request. Like Brother Jack said earlier today, it's not a request. It's a command. He tells us to go. He doesn't give you the option to say, you know, I'm going to serve God, but I'm going to do it in the environmentally controlled venue of my choice.
Amen. Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to pick and choose where I want to go. Try telling that to the apostles or Jonah or anybody else. He tells us to go. And we just happen to feel comfortable in the prison ministry as well. And we go there, and I never ask the crimes of these people because it's none of my business. Why? Because I'm still flesh and bone. We tend to want to judge people, and that takes on a whole new mindset rather than the purpose that we were sent there for. Now, there's times that some of them will come out, and one of them told me one time, I'm in for murder. Okay, TMI. You know, does that make you think different of me? When I get out here, can you help me get a job? I says, I don't know you. I can tell you where to go to get one, but I won't even recommend my own son. I'm not going to put my name with yours and say, hire this fellow. I just met you.
Amen.
The fact that you're in for murder is none of my business. And he happened to be a gentleman of color, and he pinched his skin, and he says, does this matter to you? That's an insult.
Amen.
He was just trying to prod at me. And I looked at him, and his buddy looked at me too, and I said, dude, look around. I'm the minority. Do you think it matters to me?
Amen.
People will, I don't understand that sometimes. But nevertheless, God has us to do certain things and send us to certain places, as he did Jonah, as he did Nahum here, and so on and so forth. And we are supposed to be able to put our mind on the things that he would have us to do, to handle the task at hand. I can't help but think of the shootings and things that we have in the country in the last several months. And it seems to get more and more, you hear this in the news. And it's a sad, sad thing. In our instinctive nature, I know I do. I think, you know, they ought to get him and take him out. You know, there's all sorts of things that would run through my mind that they ought to do to that person. Does God really think that way? Will that any should perish, and there's a lost sheep that is extremely lost by our understanding. Shouldn't we have the compassion that this sick individual needs help?
Amen.
And he needs salvation? And I say he or she, no matter what the situation is. But still in here, because we have knowledge of who they are and what they've done, we want the vengeance. But that's God's work. He just sends the messengers. He is slow to anger. Why? For that very reason. All of us sinners are going to sin consistently. We let him down on a regular basis. However minor or major we might categorize it, we let him down continuously. All of us do. All have sinned and become short.
Amen.
Right? There are none righteous, no, not one. Yeah, but you're a preacher. Get over it. Right? Brother Cecil? Isn't that true? I mean, we are going to sin. But we're accountable for these things. He is slow to anger because he's giving us the chance to make it right.
Amen.
Jonah, remember, went there to Nineveh 150 years before. They repented. He allowed them the grace to still be there. Now, 150 years later, for the last 100 of that, they've been the terror of the world. And even after Nahum comes and he gives this message, it's still some 100 years later before he fulfills the fall of Nineveh. Because that's the way God works. What does it say over there in 2 Peter 3, I think verses 8 and 9? About a year, I forget exactly how it's worded. A day is as 1,000 years, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but you know what I'm talking about.
Amen.
Time is not an issue with God. It's us that has to wear a watch.
Well, Lord.
We are bound to time and space. The Almighty is not. So His timing is perfect. We're the ones that are restless or whatever, right? Oh Lord, I'm going through this. Why can't you be there for me? We're a little bit selfish, aren't we? Oh, I am. Often ask myself, why, Lord? Because that's Him that's in control, not Ray Walker. Does God have the right to judge? Kind of a silly question, isn't it?
Amen.
Very silly. Look at His power over the wind and the storms and the rain, the droughts, on land and sea. You're there in verses 3 through 6 there. He has historically proven His power over His creation, and some of the most common things that we know of is, of course, parting the Red Sea, parting the River Jordan. There's people to cross there. How about the pillar of fire and the cloud before His people in the wilderness? All of these things that He's done. He has control of creation. And sometimes I laugh because some of the things that I've heard people say, they would indicate that somehow creation has power over the Creator. It doesn't happen that way.
Amen.
Never happens that way. Nations today act as though there is no God. One good way, one great way to do that. Turn on your television set.
Amen.
We don't have cable at our house, and I'm not saying cable is of the devil. I'm just saying we don't. One of the reasons is that our son, we have rabbit ears. And I think, well, we got that Roku now, you know, you can get through Wi-Fi, and we're very selective on what we watch. You know, it's almost getting to the point where you can't even hardly watch a Hallmark production.
Amen. Amen.
But we're very selective on what we watch, and we're very selective on what we let Josh watch because of how it influences and stuff. You can't go anywhere without seeing the promotion of sin, advertising on the roads, everything else.
Amen.
And we live in this. This is choices. This is choices that we make. There's a song that we haven't done in quite a while that says, life has many choices, but eternity only has two.
Amen.
There's no middle of the road.
Amen.
And no matter what Reggie McDonald says, there's no gray area. That's a joke. Anyway, two choices and that's it. And I laugh sometimes. I tell folks, I'm choosing air conditioning. I'm not interested in heating.
Amen.
Heaven ain't air conditioned. I don't imagine He has any need for anything mechanical. Amen? Nineveh fell from a great flood. In these scriptures here, it's talking about a little more history, I guess, on this is the Mede army and the Babylonian army have been trying for quite some time to overtake this city because they were such a superpower in the world at that time and such a world terror that they were trying to come together to go against them to no avail. They tried many times. Their walls of their city were so greatly fortified and everything else that nobody could penetrate this city. And if they did, they still had the Assyrian army to face. They still had this Assyrian army to face. I can only imagine, reading the scriptures and studying and all, I'm sitting there trying to imagine in my head what that must have looked like to face an army of that capacity, face to face. The fear that might have come across their faces and in their hearts and such, to know that you're facing the superpower of the world and nobody has ever conquered it. But you keep trying and you keep trying. And you keep suffering losses. That has to wear on you. That has to wear on you. Lord, why can't, I don't imagine they're saying, Lord, but in the Christian world, Lord, why can't you help me out here? They're not getting anywhere. But wait and see what God does. There's rivers close by. And the armies are getting ready to attack. And they're not real confident again. Now this is my opinion. Because of all the losses that they've had. But what does God do? It starts to rain. We already know what He can do with rain.
Amen.
And the rain starts and keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And the Tigris River and the other river that's there that finally comes out of its banks. And it starts flooding the area. And then there's a great wind. I would say probably about hurricane force. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just imagining this. But this is how God works. We all saw what Harvey did. That pales by what I can imagine happened here. This city that was so greatly fortified is now flooded, and a great wind comes up, and the very foundations of this city crumbles. And it exposes everything. This Assyrian army that is the superpower of the world is now so they're in such discord and scared. They're probably running around like a bunch of little kids saying, what has happened? And they look up, and what do they see? The Mede army is coming in. What used to be the front of the city. The walls are gone. And they're coming. And in chapter 3 it describes the Mede army as big red shields and red scarlet robes. And their spears were big, tall spears made out of fur. And the description is it looks like a forest coming at them. Can you imagine the fear at that point on the Assyrian army's face? What is going on? What is happening? This is not something they're used to. They're looking at defeat right there before them. I can only imagine all of that red and what looks like a forest of death coming towards me. And they overtake the city. And they destroy it. And they destroy this city in such a way that the world said, this is how the world thinks. One historian says, well, the Medes and everything, they busted a dam and that's what caused all of this. I don't buy that for a minute. Because if there's ever glory in it for man, there's no glory in it for God. So why would you want to take away the glory for God? Probably the historian was an unbeliever. I don't know. Don't know who said it, but that's what one of the historians said. God did it, but He still used the Mede army and the Babylonian army to clean up the mess. And they destroyed the city so much so that I can't, here it is, they never found any evidence of the city until 1842.
Oh, man.
It was that much destroyed. Why would they be looking for that? Because the world is still out there trying to look and say, okay, the Bible says this and this and this, so we're going to dig here on this site, and we're going to prove to everybody that this is not real. That makes the Bible a lie, and it can't be true. If we can just prove one thing in the Bible is not true, then that means the whole Bible's a lie. Isn't it funny how God always leaves a remnant?
Amen.
Isn't it funny how He always leaves evidence to prove His existence? And isn't it even awesome that it's not the believing world that's finding these things, that it's the unbelievers that are trying to prove God is not real?
Amen.
And they have to ultimately acknowledge, well, okay, the Bible was correct there again. We'll go find another place to dig. We'll go do this and that. We'll keep spending that government money to try to prove God wrong because He is alive. And He's not going anywhere. He's there. But He's still the great I am.
Amen.
He destroyed Nineveh that perfectly. Because that's who He is. He's slow to anger. And the sin and stuff in our life, the trials and tribulations that we go through, we may think of God in different ways at different times in our life because of these things that we go through. But He's never left us nor forsaken us. Never has. This first chapter of Nahum is so full of despair and destruction. And I went through all of that just to say this. Look at verse 7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble.
Amen.
And He knoweth them that trust Him. Beautifully planted right in the middle of all this destruction. Right in the middle of all this mayhem. And Him telling them how He is in control and He will take care of those that are against Him. He will be there for His. We've got it. He's still the stronghold.
Yeah.
If you'll only hang on to Him and believe. If you'll only hang on to Him and believe. I'm going to refer to something else Brother Jack said. He was talking at the offering about God has all the money that He wants. It's just still in your wallets. And I mean, he was joking around, but here's the deal. There's two things that I have learned about God in my life that I never try to forget. Number one is He always gives us enough.
Amen.
Always has. And if we really look at our lives a little bit closer, we can see that He's given us more than enough. The second thing is, He's given me His best. Why shouldn't I give you my best, Lord?
Amen.
And the other side of that coin is He knows when you've given your best. He knows it. You might convince yourself that you have. But He knows if you have or haven't. God is still a stronghold in all areas of our life, no matter what we're going through. Do you believe that here today?
Amen.
All that just to go to verse 7. Because that's the way life can be. I didn't get to see what happened in this area after Harvey. I got lots of friends and co-workers that were here. And I can still see evidence of some of the destruction. I can only imagine with what little I saw, some of the despair and things like that went on here. And probably still. But then I have to remember, since I wasn't a victim of this, I can't really comment officially, if you will. But I still have to go back to the scripture that says that the Son of Man had nowhere to lay His head. In Luke chapter 9. The Son of Man. Look at this building today. I guarantee you that everybody in this room today had a warm bed and a dry ceiling.
Amen.
He's given us enough because He is our stronghold in all areas of life. Do you believe that here today?
Amen.
Would you stand with me?